Open up the door, it's Dave!
Who?
Dave! D-A-V-E!
Dave?
Right, man, Dave.
Dave's not here.
Whew, it is hot out today, I tell you. But I wanted to work on my hydroponic garden a little bit and give you a quick update on where I am. As I mentioned before, everything was going really well. Things were growing, everything was doing great. I started adding some more fruits and vegetables to the mix, and everything was going really well. Now, periodically, I'd come in and add a little more nutrient to the mix and make it a little bit better. And then I noticed that some of the plants started to die. And then over time, they all died. I was like, what the heck is going on? I'm keeping everything pretty much the way it was. Everything's working. And then just suddenly, almost overnight, they all just died off. It turns out that there's a combination of problems that happen here. The first is that the pH of the water can get off very quickly, especially with the plants and the nutrients that they put out. They actually release some of their nutrient out through their root structure. Sometimes the leaf dies, sometimes other things happen, but once in a while, the plants actually release something into the water, and that actually changes the pH of the water. The pH naturally changes anyway as it has more nutrient in it and other things go on. So I learned that one of the things I had to do was to test the pH regularly and adjust the water in it. And then also I learned that I was adding too much nutrient to the water because I wasn't letting the water out. Something you have to do is you have to go in and every 10 days or so, you have to let all the water out of your tank at the bottom and replace it with fresh water and put more nutrient in it, rather than just adding nutrient to the water. You can do that periodically, but over the course of time, it starts to build up. So my water itself had become something that was very dirty and polluted in a way that was causing the plants to not absorb the nutrient they needed. So what I had to do was go back and change my design to add a valve to let the water out, just to make it easier so that every time I want to change it, I don't have to like figure out how to get the water out of the tank, because remember that the tank is set up like this. And to be able to change the water out of it periodically, you have to dump it over or do something to it, and it just takes a little extra effort. So I put a valve on it to make it easier to be able to let the water out, and then I can add fresh water to it and put more nutrient in. So that's the answer. So I learned something very interesting about this, and hopefully this will continue to grow, but it's an ongoing process where you learn new things all the time and keep adjusting for them. So let's go ahead and turn it on, let a little nutrient go to the plants here a minute, and let them enjoy. Okay, plants, hope you enjoy this. You may notice also that I changed my design slightly so that I took off the valve that lets the water back in. I decided that was a better choice for how this should work. And yeah, it makes a little more noise, but I can live with that. That's not so bad. It's only on for about 15 minutes every 3 times a day, so not such a big deal. I did tell you this was a learning experience, and that it has been. And as an aside, I also learned a very valuable lesson about the Flora series that I have the 3-pack of. You know, I have the one for the growth, we have the one that's supposed to help you bloom, and then we have the third one, which is supposed to give you the growth. So between these 3, they're supposed to help your hydroponics garden grow, which is great. The problem is how you use them and how you add them to your holding tank. So what I remember when I first started was one of the things they tell you is, be careful when you're putting them in. You want to make sure you mix it thoroughly as you're adding the other 2. So that way the chemicals don't interact with each other and cause a problem for your growth. That's, you know, it's just sort of standard practice, right? About 7 or 8 days into my last hydroponics water change, I noticed the water level went down, and I read something that suggested add a little bit more of the Flora series. That's a good thing. But what I didn't do was mix them first and have it mixed when I put it into the reservoir. Instead, I added each one of these individually into the reservoir and then mixed it up that way. And I think I wound up causing some sort of a chemical imbalance, and there was some sort of a problem with the nutrient that was being provided to the plants. So for about 2 days, I was actually giving it bad nutrient, and I could see that the plants were responding to that and actually getting a little bit darker and started to have their leaves wilt a little bit. And that's when it occurred to me, let me drain it again and start over and do this right. And from now on, what I'm going to do is mix all of these 3 things in a bucket with a little bit of water and then add that to my reservoir. So that way I'm not changing the water content, I'm not changing the nutrient content. I want to make sure that it's nutrient rich, nutrient dense, but I'm not changing it in some way that throws off the pH or throws off the nutrient balance, which will kill the plants. As I said, I continue to learn. This is a really exciting thing that I'm learning and getting so much out of this, But it's an ongoing process, I have to tell you. Show you how this works. I have my ball valve here, and I go ahead and turn it so that the water will be flowing out. And you can see I put a little tube on there just to make it easier so it flows away from the wall, but I let the water flow out. And while that's flowing out, I go ahead and take a bucket, put some water in it, and start adding my nutrients. So I add the first nutrient, and once it's in there, I take just a popsicle stick and I stir it up and make sure that it's nice and mixed in there. And that way I'm starting my process of getting everything together. I give it a good mix and make sure that there's not a little bit of nutrient that's kind of in a little glob there or something that might adhere to something else and maybe have a chemical reaction with one of the other nutrients. So I just give it a stir for 30 seconds or so and just get it all mixed up. Now I'm ready for the next one. So I take my next one and put it in as well. Same thing, I go ahead as soon as I've got it in there, I start stirring it up just to make sure that it all gets all nice and mixed up and everybody's happy, and my plants will like it as a nutrient mix that's going to help them. And then I move to the third one and do the same thing. Now at some point after these plants are more established, I might just go with the ones that go for blooming just to make it a little bit better. But for now, as I'm trying to get them to grow and get healthy and whatnot, now in the meantime, I've been letting the water drain out of the reservoir, and I can see that it's done now, so I take my little pipe off, I turn the bulb valve off to the other setting, and then I go ahead and start refilling the reservoir with just my hose. And I'm going to fill it until it gets to a certain point, about 3/4 of the way up, and then I'll add my nutrient mix. So now that it's full, I'm going to go ahead and put my nutrient mix in. I peeked inside just to make sure I knew where it was, and now I'll put my mix in here just like this. I'll go ahead and tip it over and drop it in. And yeah, I realize I'm spilling some of it on the lid of the reservoir, but that's okay. I'm just going to take the hose and quickly just push everything back in there. I think that'll work out okay. It has so far, so I think I'm okay with it. Now that everything's in there, I can go ahead and turn my system back on and get it running really well again. Now, you notice I have this little plastic thing in my hand. I wanted to explain what that's all about. I'm going to try growing some seeds in rock wool. So I got this thing of rock wool and I'm just going to pull a few off. You douse them with a little bit of water, and then you're going to put your seeds in the little holes in the middle. And the objective is to get them to germinate inside this rock wool. So here I have some seeds. I believe these were heirloom tomatoes that I had. I just took the seeds out of it and I let them dry. And I'm just going to push them into the little holes there like this. And once they're in there, I can cover this up and just put it outside to grow for a couple of days. And it should work really well. So we'll see how it goes. On a future video, I'll give you an update on how that went. But that's it. You just let them grow for a couple of days, then you can plant them.
What's your point, David?